dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The newest show sensation streaming throughout the multiverse. Your hang place in cyberspace for paranormal news and views. Taboo Topics with Gene Broida.
Welcome everyone to Taboo Topics with Gene Broida. I'm your host, Gene Broida, also known as Lightworker 111, beaming to you from sea to shining sea, across the Americas and the world every Sunday night between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States and Canada, on my Taboo Topics with Gene Broida YouTube channel, at tabootopics.life/shows, and multicast on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network at globalenlightenmentradionnetwork.com. Panelists on Taboo Topics with Gene Broida read news articles about paranormal events, conspiracies, and other hush-hush subjects that we all probe further before moving on to the next taboo topic. On today's show, today being the last day of May, May 31st, 2020, the year the world went insane and declared war on influenza. May 31st, 2020, on today's show, please welcome our guest panelists, the esteemed Mike Beaver, hypnotherapist and IT professional, and Stephen Myers, author, lecturer, and expert on the Great Pyramids. Mike Beaver, please introduce yourself to our Paranormal Roundtable fans and followers.
Well, I've been working IT for 40 years, non-professionally, and professionally for over 25. My customers include the CIA, the FBI, Defense Security Services, DISA, top Fortune 50, 100, 500, a lot of DOD, Army, Air Force, Marine Corps. Okay, so I sat in the war room, Petraeus' war room in Afghanistan for a short period, watching live drone feeds. I worked with one guy to stop a congressional investigation. Me and one other guy did, single-handedly. That's my IT stuff. As far as, that's what I do for a living. By talent, I'm a hypnotherapist, but I haven't worked with any clients in a long time, but I helped one guy remove an attaching spirit. I worked with one lady who was used as a breeder for the Greys. She had 55 offspring, 72 encounters with one of the Grey races, 24 implantations, 24 checkups, and 24 removals. That's my hypnotherapy work. And I spent over a decade doing stunts in the motion picture industry in between short IT contracts in Houston, Texas, but never went to Hollywood, so I didn't make it big. So I've done some acting in the movies, but I've never said a single word in any movie, not even He Went That Way. But that's me.
I understand that James Garner got his start as a juryman is what they used to call him when they were all men on juries. He was a juryman on that epic movie with, help me out here, guys, with Henry Fonda, and it was an all-star cast. But Garner sat in the seat. 12 Angry Men is the title. 12 Angry Men. And it was a rockin' cast, black and white movie from the old times when they wrote good scripts and stuff. I guess that's a little harsh, but in any event, he said he learned the most about acting by sitting in that jury box, rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, and just watching the seasoned professionals act. What was your experience like? I dabble in theater, and that part of you intrigues me because I wouldn't have suspected that.
Well, the most dangerous stunt I ever did was a flying sidekick off a 2-story racquetball court on the Wild Ranch in West Texas. That's a ranch where they take people to shoot big animals pulled in from Africa, which is a travesty. But anyway, high falls, the lower they are, the more dangerous they are. So if you do a high fall off a 2-story building, it's way more dangerous than off a 90-foot tower, because you don't have any time to change your body after you go off the building.
How many feet is a 2-story building? You're mixing apples and oranges here and confusing my little head.
Probably less than 60 foot.
So we're comparing 60 feet to how many feet?
90, or not 60 foot, more like 10, 15, less than 30 foot compared to 90 foot. It's one third times 3 times as high. The high falls, 90 foot is the guy who was my biggest connection, David Sanders, he did 92-foot high falls at Astroworld twice a day into a little bucket on the bottom. And so, you know, if he's got a long time to change his trajectory in the air before he hits the target. Okay.
I get it. Yes, I get that. I do physics, so I understand that relationship between distance and time.
See, if you do a flying sidekick off of a building, your body, you tend to have your upper body upright and your lower body is out to the side because you're kicking to the side. Well, when you hit the mat, you have to be laying on your back. So to go from one position to the other 2 stories is not enough time. So basically, you have to figure out that when you come off the building, you have to be laying down as you come off the building. It's the start.
So you're pancaking downward, basically.
Well, I landed
belly down. Is that what you're saying?
I landed on a very hard sponge bag twice standing up.
Standing up?
Standing up. And it caused my whole body compressed down. My head hit my knee, broke all the blood vessels around my eye. My eye filled up with blood, and my rib cage got the worst of it. And I had to do it 3 times. Okay, so I landed on it twice standing up. The 3rd time I looked at the little playback video, and I looked small as a gnat. And I was like, they can't even tell what I looked like coming off this building. So next time I'll just do it flat coming off the building. And I landed like I should have landed at the beginning, but the mat, hadn't positioned the mat close enough to the building. So my back actually landed from the stomach down on the mat and from the stomach up off the mat. So theoretically, I should have broken my back, but for some reason I didn't. And I'm still here to talk to you, but I did it wrong 3 times. So
it's an amazing story, actually.
That's
one doesn't hear very often. Thank you for sharing it.
One stunt. That's just a single stunt.
Now I'm going to probe you. A little bit about your IT work with intelligence agencies, or would you have to shoot me?
Well, the most interesting thing about my work with the company, the CIA, was, okay, so it has nothing to do with my job. Actually, it has to do with something that happened before the job. I had another job with the company where I had to take a full scope poly, right? And I failed the poly. So I'm going through this full scope poly, and I failed it. And he's taking these things off of my body, and he's telling me I failed the exam, and there's these 2 questions I failed. And he tells me the 2 questions. He said I failed them over and over and over. And I told the exact perfect truth on every question. So I'm like, how could I fail 2 questions when I told the truth? It doesn't make any sense, right? So one of the questions I forgot, one of the questions I will never forget. Question was, do you have any ongoing contact with foreign agents? And the truthful answer is no. So if I don't have any foreign contacts with foreign contacts with agents from overseas, how is it the machine was telling him that I was being deceptive on that question? Well, obviously, it's my alien contacts. You see, it's picking up the fact that I have contacts with actual alien contact, close encounters, that sort of thing.
Your subconscious is saying, I'm in touch with illegal aliens, but not the kind you mean.
Right.
Government worker.
Correct.
The paranormal kind. Well, thanks so much, Mike. You're a trove of experience, and as a story writer and enthusiast of all kinds of paranormal experiences, I can't wait to find out much, much more about you. But right now, let's swivel the turret of our attention to Stephen Myers, an equally fascinating personage to grace our show. Stephen Myers, thank you for joining Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. What would you like our international audience to know about yourself?
Thank you, Jean, for having me on your show and inviting me on. I appreciate this opportunity. Yeah, my name is Stephen Myers. I'm the founder of a nonprofit foundation called the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. It's dedicated to understanding how and why the Great Pyramid was built. And the website for that foundation is www.thepump.org. And we are dedicated to understanding the assembly process of the Great Pyramid, just for interest's sake, but also to understand why the original builders went to the effort to create such a huge and massive structure. So that's the purpose of our foundation, but you can find out about our mission statement and goals and activities by visiting our website. I'm also the author of 2 books. My first book is Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, which you can get on Amazon. And also,
go ahead and hold that a little closer, please, Stephen. Closer. Too close.
Okay. Anyway, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid. It is about how the Great Pyramid was assembled. Isn't that interesting? And my second book is about, it's called The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. And it's also in softcover or Kindle ebook format. And it is about why they went to the effort to build such a great big thing. And both books have illustrations and everything in there. And I'm also produced 2 documentaries. This is the first documentary. It's available on Amazon DVD format. It describes the assembly process and is a companion piece to my first book. And my other documentary, I don't have a copy with me right here. And it's about why they built the Great Pyramid. So that's the focus of my research. I'm just a humble researcher and, interested in technology, that type of thing. And have ultimately focused on how that particular construction project we call the Great Pyramid, how it was assembled and why.
Did I read somewhere you spent at least 20 years looking into this topic?
Well, it's been, at first it was an interest, back in the day before internet, you'd go down to the library and read books, those square things that people don't read anymore. But yeah, it's been at least 20 years, if not longer. Been to Egypt, of course, going back in February, leading a tour, and we'll visit a number of sites in Egypt besides the Great Pyramid. So information for the tour is at our website at thepump.org. So yes, I've been doing this for quite a few radio talk shows, and I'm happy to be on this one.
Well, I'm so blessed to have both of you here, Stephen and Mike. And I am your host, Jean Broida. Welcome to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, broadcast every Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. That's Broida. You can also get there while we're broadcasting from tabootopics.life with an F there at the end. And it's /shows. That'll link you to the YouTube site. And we are also simulcast on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network at globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I myself have been a lifelong UFO researcher. People ask me, have you had an experience? Probably. Is my memory repressed? Probably. Have I ever had hypnotherapy? No. Do I want it? I'm waffling. But I am serious enough about the subject of UFOs. Mostly the aspect of UFO research that interests me is the fact that the United States government and other governments have fought so hard to suppress the truth about UFOs. And just recently, the Pentagon admitted that 3 sets of UFO footage from US Navy pilots that had been leaked illicitly 2 and 3 years ago. They have been declassified by the Pentagon as not a threat to national security and released to the public as authentic. So what we have are tic-tac shaped UFOs and other orbs flying around Navy carrier formations. They're on training maneuvers, typically, or doing business we shouldn't know anything about. And UFOs are real. UFOs are real. So why am I still covering UFOs? And I'm beginning to wonder, maybe it's time to shift attention to the standemic that's going on. And that's not my topic for tonight. But if we're talking about light work, and I write under the name Lightwork 111, Lightworker 111 is my pen name, and my website is lightwork111.com. A light worker sheds light into the dark corners of reality as we know it, and especially wants to expose evil, selfish acts, selfish deeds, senseless acts, and destructive acts. Just not destructive for the sake, destructive for the sake of destruction, or destruction in the case of the United States right now, illegal destruction. That seems to be what's going down. And again, this is not a political show tonight unless we go there. My point is that I have questioned reality as we know it since infancy, basically, since childhood, since as far back as I can remember, which suggests a childhood UFO abduction to people who are interested and knowledgeable about such matters. And I vibrate, resonate, attune to starseed lore, starseed theory as proposed by Dolores Cannon, where waves of people from other planetary systems came in to help humans raise consciousness enough to do some attitudinal, mental, psychological, emotional, all of the above transcendental experience called ascendance. Going to ascend, and before ascendance is the awakening, which is happening now. I feel like I'm riding this whole wave of cultural change, and I also saw the 1960s, the psychedelic 60s. So I've been around the racetrack a few times, and I wrote a book myself, Unknown Objects, the Top 10 U.S. UFO Cases. It covers Foo Fighters after World War II, so late 1940s, right up through the 1997 Phoenix Lights episode or incident. And in fact, that's what I'll be talking about tonight on tonight's show, or today, wherever you are in the world, today being the last day of May 31st, 2020. And what's interesting is that a growing number of truth seekers and starseeds are waking up in consciousness and we're questioning authority, and we're questioning the emotional impact on our society from these sweeping official cover-ups, so numerous now, and again and again and again, over 7 decades in the case of UFOs. What does this impact have on society? The Navy pilots came forward because they were psychologically brutalized by having to suppress what they knew and being ridiculed even by their own crewmates about what they had seen with their own eyes, what they had on radar. Okay, they didn't make this stuff up. This was documented. This is what happened. This was reality. And we're living in a society where where powers that are telling us what to do, powers we elect that are telling us what to do, have decided that the truth doesn't matter anymore. Facts don't matter anymore. Emotions matter, and the only emotion of account right now is fear. This was the same kind of attitude the United States government wanted to associate with UFOs, and failing that, because the majority of UFO encounters with UFO occupants, most of those apparently are benign, if not friendly. There are some cases of horror. I'm not saying they're all pleasant, but the government spin didn't stick. Public reaction was like Teflon, and the government spin just slid off. So, well, if we can't fearmonger UFOs, we'll call people crazy and we'll laugh at them. So you must be crazy to believe in UFOs. Now the government says they're real. That's why we're here. That's what we do that's what we do on Taboo Topics. And I am thrilled to lead us off with our first news article on a Taboo Topics with Jean Broida episode, the last day of May 31st, 2020. This is a piece I wrote for thedailyconspiracy.com, published just a few days ago, May 26th, 2020, titled Aliens Told Engineer Secret to Eternal Life. Here we go. George Van Tassel is one of the most interesting figures in ufology. In the 1950s, the aeronautical mechanic claimed extraterrestrial beings showed him how to build a device that could bestow longevity. Extending the human lifespan was important, said the aliens, because by the time people had lived long enough to begin to understand divine principles and how the cosmos works, they die. Van Tassel wrote up the cosmic wisdom he received from an ET named Sol Ganda. In his first book, I Wrote a Flying Saucer, published in 1952 and reprinted in 1955. The future contactee was born in 1910 in Jefferson, Ohio, to a middle-class family. After dropping out of high school after 10th grade, he worked at Cleveland Municipal Airport and earned a pilot's license while still a teen. When he was 20 in 1930, Van Tassel moved to California and worked as a car mechanic at a Santa Monica garage owned by one of his uncles, Glenn Payne. In the course of his duties, the young Van Tassel met and befriended an eccentric local loner, Frank Kritzer, who had crossed the big pond from Germany to scratch out a living as a prospector in the Golden State. He was working a mine around Giant Rock, the largest boulder in the desert near Landers, and perhaps the largest boulder in the world, which towers 7 stories high. And we just found out how high a story is, about 15 feet, 20 feet. Native Americans regarded the granite stone and surrounding lands as holy ground to the natives. Kritzer was suspected of being a German spy during World War II. When local police came to Giant Rock to question him in July 1942, he set off an explosion with his own dynamite that killed him. Learning of this, Van Tassel applied to the Bureau of Land Management to lease the small abandoned airport near Giant Rock. He ultimately signed a federal government contract to develop and maintain the airstrip. Between 1930 and 1947, Van Tassel worked as an aircraft mechanic and flight inspector for high-tech companies that included Douglas Aircraft, Hughes Aircraft, and Lockheed. His job at Hughes Aircraft was top flight inspector. Van Tassel was a mystic as well as an electrical engineer. He followed the work of Nikola Tesla, who had died before giving the world his promised free earth energy. Van Tassel believed the crystalline structure within the granite giant rock had great power to channel unseen forces and bits of intelligence due to its piezoelectric characteristics. In 1947, Van Tassel abandoned the budding aerospace industry in Southern California. He called it a rat race and moved his wife and 3 daughters to his desert property. The family lived simply in rooms Kritzer had excavated beneath the shade of giant rock. In time, Van Tassel constructed a new home, a cafe operated by his wife Doris, a gas station, a store, a small airstrip, and a dude ranch beside the rock. Van Tassel invited his aviating friends to fly in, stay overnight at his Come On In, INN. People who remembered the cafe said they went not to hear the UFO experiencer talk, but to wrap their lips around his wife's scrumptious apple pie. Each year, beginning in 1954, crowds of flying saucer experiencers and enthusiasts gathered in the California desert to listen to speakers and share their accounts. Some witnesses claimed that up to 11,000 attendees showed up at Giant Rock for these annual UFO space conventions. Van Tassel began to conduct weekly meditation readings at Giant Rock for groups of 25 to 45 people. And in 1952, he told them he was having close encounters with spacemen and receiving messages from them. Initially, the aliens warned of impending doom and gloom and encouraged universal brotherhood and peace. In August 1953, Van Tassel said aliens from Venus invited him aboard their spaceship. The friendly ETs gave him the architectural plans to construct a human regenerator, a 16-sided building that could reverse the aging process. Measuring 50 feet in diameter and 38 feet high, construction lasted from 1954 to 1978. Built with wood and concrete, held together by glue and gravity, electrically neutral materials, the dome-shaped structure has no metal fasteners on the inside. Only the generator core was made of copper wire. And after I wrote this article, I found out there were apparently some aluminum elements involved here as well. In theory, while operational, youth seekers would walk. In theory, when this machine became operational, youth seekers would walk through the building while wearing white outfits. The electrical charges distributed over a wide range of frequencies would revitalize every cell in their bodies. The Integratron, as it was called, was designed to recharge energy into living cell structures to bring about longer life with youthful energy. And since the body is an electrical device, aging occurs when the cells run out of power. By collecting up to 50,000 volts of static electricity from the air, the Integratron would serve as a multi-frequency electrostatic charger for human cells. Van Tassel died on February 9th, 1978, of an apparent heart attack, that's what they called it, before the Integratron was completed and tested. His family suspected that his second wife worked for a group bent on keeping rejuvenation a secret, at least from the general public. After his death, someone removed the Integratron's core and other critical components. Van Tassel purposefully left no written plans for the device to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. with 400 broadcast shows and thousands of UFO conventioneers behind him, Van Tassel's numerous supporters believed in his invention that was 90% complete when he died. And if it had worked, would they have spurned their traditional beliefs? Could one man, helped by extraterrestrial beings, engineer cellular regeneration and longevity? If so, would this threaten government control? As with many UFO cases, this one remains unsolved, and Van Tassel's Venusian vision of eternal youth remains clouded. So that's my take on this. And I hadn't really looked at this Van Tassel dude. He's lumped in together with George Adamski, who's a kind of shadier figure. This guy came out of aerospace, and he built this 16-sided building with a domed roof in the stinking desert of California, out in the middle of nowhere, next to the largest boulder in the world, called it the Integratron, all on extraterrestrials' orders. Whether they actually came from Venus or not is questionable in my mind. But what's interesting, one, I want to make two comments before I kick it off to guest panelists here. First comment. We have, along with Van Tassel's Venusian contact, we have the story of Thor, Valiant Thor, who had a much longer title. Valiant Thor landing, basically, I think it was Arlington, Virginia, somewhere on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., in a spacecraft with an entourage of military command, saying they were from Venus also. So in the mid-1950s, there was a wave, apparently, or at least several reported cases, documented cases, of contact with alleged Venusians. Were they really as a UFO researcher and ufologist, I have to ask skeptically, would these beings actually be from Venus, or would they have looked at Jetsons cartoons and think this is something these people could wrap their heads around in 1955? We're from Venus. Hello, we're from Venus. You know, not hello, we're from someplace we can't even pronounce, right? Betelgeuse even. That's hard for a lot of people. My second comment is that other people noted this work, this cellular energy work that Van Tassel was into. And by the way, by all accounts, he didn't ask for this. These Venusians, or whoever they were, offered this technology to him. I don't think he has ever asked for eternal life. They just said, you know, really, it's not profitable. I'm imagining this. It's not profitable for us to really get to know you, because you'll be dead unless we give you the power of eternal life, or at least a longer life. And here you go. Here's the plans. And he was from an engineering background. He was familiar with airplanes and car guts, you know, engines and the physics behind these forces, these conveyances. And I thought he could certainly build a dome that's not flying around, but it had elements that I think were rotational to set up a field. I don't know though for sure. Nobody knows for sure. It was 90% complete when he died of an apparent heart attack in perfect health, ruled a suicide. Anywho, my comment was that this all happened at the time of Wilhelm Reich, another energy worker who worked with orgone, which basically is sexual energy. And he worked a lot with mostly women, but also men who were sexually frustrated. And he found that layering organic and inorganic materials increased an organic field, a field of orgone, which stimulated life energy, and also the sexual response in, say, premenopausal women at least, and men of all ages, I'm sure. And his treatments were so successful that he was persecuted for treating over interstate boundaries. I don't want to say which organization. I think it was the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, said no interstate commerce on something we haven't approved, and it was curing cancer. So they wouldn't ever approve that, of course. And he was persecuted. He was imprisoned for this interstate commerce infraction of curing cancer and such. They're effective remedies. And he died, I believe it was the day before or the day of his release from prison. And again, this was right around the same time, late 1950s. So that I have exhausted my wisdom. Well, I haven't exhausted. I want to give everybody else a turn. Let's be honest. I want to give everybody else a turn. And I'm taking everybody's mutes off. Mike, Beaver, Stephen Myers, welcome to Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. What's your take on this whole business of energy work, frequency as a cellular healing agent, government persecution? There's so many angles to this. That's why I like a story like this. I don't like the story, but the fact that he died before the construction was completed, but it has a lot of intriguing angles, it seems to me. What do you guys think?
Well, certainly it's interesting. There's been a lot of suppression, I think, of information, health information, energy information, and that type of thing, with these people dying mysteriously, with everything electric, or not electric, but hydrogen powered cars. The fellow that started to develop that died mysteriously. And so it's a strange world, but we're in a revolution of ideas right now in all of this turmoil that we're in, and hopefully some of these technologies will come to light.
Hear, hear, but do you think they will?
I do think they will. People, slavery was an institution, as strong as iron, but it didn't last because it just couldn't. And it was, women weren't allowed to vote. And that was the natural order of things. But a lot of times the natural order of things changes, and it usually changes quickly and violently. And I think that ultimately, one day there'll be a cure for cancer that you don't have to pay money for. Or one day there'll be a way to generate electricity that you don't have to send a check out every month. And
but do you think that aren't there cures for cancer? Just like you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, patents for hydrogen cars and alternative fuel sources for various appliances have been suppressed historically. We know this is true.
Yeah, we do know that's true.
Do you have any inkling or reason to suspect or believe that the same is happening with sorry, I lost my thought train there. You know what we were talking about. Well, that the same is going down.
With certainly with both medical and energy fields, there's been, I think, suppression of effective cures and alternative energy systems. But I think that things change, and we mentioned that earlier before the show, that that's the big constant is change. And we're in a revolution of ideas. The people with the internet and all of this can get ideas and a flow of information. And I think things are going to get better.
I like your optimism. In fact, I love your optimism. Plan for the best, prepare for the worst live by. And I think you were mentioning that change is the only constant. My dad used to say that a lot.
Oh, yes.
We asked him what his #1 job title would have been if he could have rewritten the book of his life. What job title did he not have that he would have wanted to have had the most? He said, without even hesitating, chief scientist. That's what a geek he was. So Mike Beaver, take your mute off, my friend, and let's have you kick in on this discussion on aliens contacting humans as far back, at least, as the 1950s. And in this case, of Van Tassel sharing knowledge, apparently forbidden knowledge and taboo knowledge, about how to build a machine, a structure. This is a large structure out in the desert, where people could walk through this thing and get an electrostatic charge of some kind that vitalizes every cell in their bodies basically and brings them into alignment with the itness in the whatness. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of technologies have been suppressed over the years, and but none of that's been fully suppressed. I mean, what's the guy? Not Wilhelm Reich, but I'm trying to think of the healer with the microscope that nobody could ever duplicate, that had all the frequencies. You know what I'm talking about, right? I'm trying to think of his name, but
I'm not catching your wavelength yet, but I don't doubt that there is such a person.
Well, this guy developed a microscope that nobody has ever duplicated since his death, and it was the only microscope ever invented that could see living tissue. So in a normal microscope, you have to kill the tissue before you put it under the scope. But this thing could see live tissue, and nobody's ever duplicated it since then. But Roy Rife, right? Roy Raymond Rife. Okay, so there is an abductee who's an associate of mine who has basically brought Rife's technology back to life. I can tell you, he's one of the editors of my book. My book is called An Excerpt, and okay, let me go to it right now since I've got it up. Hold on one second. My book is called Instruments of Control: How Attaching Spirits Cause War, Terrorism, Crime, Racism, Murder, Insanity, Mental Illness, Molestation, Marital Discord, Suicide, and many other illnesses, and are leading humanity to its fourth impending fall. So one of the editors of my book, who I'm going to go back and give you his name here real quick. I want to take a second. Yeah, it's right on my main page. Okay, right. Yeah, here we go. The two editors of my book, one of them wrote the world's most voluminous book on herbs, Gary Lockhart. The other person wrote, who edited my book, he's the guy that has reinvented Rife's technology. Okay, so I was sitting across from him in a restaurant one day, and he's made the claim that he's the world's foremost authority on Rife technology. Okay, so Rife's technology, what Rife would do is he would put living tissue under his microscope, and he would take a frequency and he would bombard the living tissue with a frequency, and he would keep changing the frequency, and he would spend days changing the frequency until he figured out what frequency the organisms lived at. And when the frequency he was bombarding the organism with matched that of the frequency, it would start absorbing that energy and it would kill it. So I've met other healers who've invented similar technology where they could kill various different tissue, including cancer cells, with this same technology. So anyway, I was sitting across from Jimmy Holman is his name. I had a hard time thinking about remembering it. Jimmy Holman claims to be the world's foremost authority right now on Rife technology. He wrote the algorithms for the HARP device. You guys know about the HARP device, right?
Talking about the high auroral era.
Highly active Aurora Research Project.
That one up in Alaska and
Correct.
elsewhere on Earth. I'm familiar with it. HAARP. We're not talking angels here.
Well, Gary Lockhart, the guy, one of the editors of my book, his publisher was the son of the senator whose plane hit the side of a mountain, who used to talk, who talks more about HARP than anybody alive. He's the guy that's been talking about HARP. This publisher has been talking about HARP more than anybody who's ever lived. He's the guy that's known for talking about HARP. You can probably remember his name anyway, he owns a publishing company, and he published Gary Lockhart's book. He's one of the editors. editors of my book, and he wrote the world's most voluminous book on herbs. So the other editor of my book, Jimmy Homeland, who claims to be the world's foremost Royal Raymond Rife healer inventor at this time, I was sitting across from him in a restaurant, and I said to him, "Why do you think you're the world's foremost authority on Rife devices?" He said, "Well, my dad was writing the algorithms for the HARP device. And when he finished, I took over and I wrote them to turn on and off the HARP device as quickly as possible. And when I finished working on those algorithms for the federal government, and I did meet this guy in Dallas, Texas, and the original company that built the HARP device, I got to think of their name. It's a very, very short name. It's the blackest company I've ever come across. They never had any listing in the yellow pages or the white pages. And Raytheon bought them at one point to get that project. So anyway, he worked for that company when I first met him, or before I met him. He might have already left his employment there. But anyway, I was sitting in this restaurant talking to him. I said, why do you feel you're the best on Rife technology? He says, well, my father was working on the algorithms of the HARP device. When he finished, I took over. And when I finished for the government, I kept working on those algorithms after my employment with the government working on the HARP device. And I got them to the point where they would pulse on and off technology faster than anything on Earth. And nobody has algorithms that'll turn a signal on and off faster than anything I've ever developed. I have the fastest algorithms for turning stuff on and off ever written. And that's why nobody has the frequencies that he can develop are infinitely more than Rife was able to develop. They're much larger. And
are you saying, am I hearing you correctly, that the engineering technology and scientific principles behind HAARP, the top secret project to extend the ionosphere of the Earth through microwave pulses, extremely powerful microwave pulses, thought to induce weather manipulation and possibly even deflect onto other parts of the Earth and perhaps trigger massive earthquakes and tsunamis? Are you saying that that technology, HARP, was based on Reich's technology?
No. Okay, so now what I'm saying is the inventor, the current inventor that I'm talking about, Jimmy Homeland, his dad was writing the algorithms that allowed the HARP device to function, to turn it on and off, to make its frequencies different to whatever they wanted them to be.
Right. So he was doing like signal switching for HARP, but how does he relate to?
It's not signal switching.
Okay.
Turning the frequency on and off, faster or slower.
Okay.
The faster you turn it off, the wider the frequency. The slower you turn it off, the narrower the frequency. So you change the frequency by pulsing it on and off faster or slower. Okay. So the way his Rife devices work, you can take a CB radio. CB radio can be licensed for medical research. So what he does is he takes a CB radio and he guts it. He takes everything out of it, and then he's had various companies, including foreign companies, invent components to go in the CB radio, which are way beyond any components and anything invented out there. And he when he puts it all back together, he's got a CB radio that'll put out 10, 50, 100 times the signal of a normal CB radio, right? Then he takes that frequency, he puts it through a transformer, and it pops it up to about 10,000 volts. And then that frequency, that voltage is sent to a tube, a tube that has a neon gas inside of it. And that, when the fourth state of matter is plasma. So you got liquid, solid, gas, and plasma.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here and interrupt for the sake of time, and I need to understand this. If I heard you correctly, a man you met who wrote software.
I didn't meet him. I know him. He's an associate.
Your associate wrote software. Who wrote software to control HARP
He wrote algorithms.
Also took an interest in Wilhelm Reich's technology and has developed devices along that line of research. Am I right now?
Well,
is that right? Is that the deal?
Jimmy Homeland is an abductee. Okay.
But yes or no? Did I
So,
get it or not?
yes, Jimmy Homeland is an abductee. He found implants in his body. He removed them from his body, and he wanted to understand how they work. So he started examining their frequencies of what they put out, and that led him into looking at Rife's technologies and reinventing Rife's work.
Cool. Well, thank you for using small words that even I can understand. And with that said, thanks everyone for tuning in to the last day of May 31st, 2020 episode of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Tonight's extra special guest panelists are Mike Beaver and Stephen Myers. We broadcast every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. I get so excited. Eastern Time at my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, at tabootopics.life/shows, and simulcast on globalenlightenmentradiionetwork.com. Next on deck, we have a fascinating man, longtime pyramid researcher and deep thinker, Stephen Myers, who is muted.
Yes.
Stephen, what scintillating article on a taboo topic have you brought for us here?
Well, I've written several articles besides my books, of course, and this article is in World Explorer magazine. David Hatcher Childress is a publisher, and this is his magazine. And this is the article is featured on the cover about the Great Pyramid water pump. So it is volume 7, number 4. And you can get it from Adventures Unlimited Press if you so desire. That's the cover of the article. Anyway, I can read some of the article.
That's a nice cover. They do good work.
They do good work. It's a fun place. They have a lot of alternative magazines. I'll give them another plug. Adventures Unlimited Press. You can get my book there, of course, and that type of thing. So fun guy, David Hatcher Childress. He's on Ancient Aliens and all of that. But anyway, it is about the Great Pyramid, and I will start reading it now. And it's titled The Great Pyramid Water Pump. It's let me get my cheaters on. Got to do that so I can see. Why was the Great Pyramid built? This question has fascinated the minds of thinkers, authors, and researchers for thousands of years. Why did those ancient builders conceive of such a construction project and expend a gargantuan effort to complete this extremely expensive undertaking? What was the purpose of this colossal construction project, which justified such a huge expenditure of time and resources? Humans make things. That is obviously what we do. Everything we make is considered to be worth the effort. A hammer, an aircraft carrier, a pencil, the Hoover Dam, a voodoo doll, a chair, the Panama Canal, a book, or even a loaf of bread are all things that people make which require effort and expend resources to produce. Although the items listed serve different purposes and vary in their cost to manufacture, all are considered to be worth the effort and expense to create. A hammer is worth the expenditure to make because the benefit a hammer provides is greater than the cost to produce it. To put it another way, the cost of making a hammer is an investment to obtain the larger benefit a hammer provides. The original builders of the Great Pyramid had a benefit in mind when they built this massive structure. The benefit they would receive from building the Great Pyramid was why it was built. They felt that the value of the benefit exceeded the expense of building the Great Pyramid. If the benefit was not greater than the expense, then the Great Pyramid would have never been built. In that the undertaking to build the Great Pyramid was massive, the benefit must have been even more tremendous than the cost. The huge cost of making the Great Pyramid was an investment to obtain the larger benefit the Great Pyramid provided. Although well known to designers and builders at the time of construction, what this huge benefit actually was is seemingly lost to the sands of time. In our modern age, there is no consensus as to the benefit the Great Pyramid provided. Why the Great Pyramid was built is hotly contested by Egyptologists, researchers, and authors. In the last 1,000 years, numerous explanations have been offered to the general public to explain the benefit the Great Pyramid provided. These explanations are a virtually endless variety of answers to why the Great Pyramid was built. In the Middle Ages, it was taught that the pyramids in Egypt were granaries. Although not as popular now as it was 70 years ago, the Great Pyramid was considered to have been built to confirm scriptural events and Bible prophecies. Researchers discovered many so-called alignments and correlations between the Great Pyramid and the Holy Scriptures, prompting the Great Pyramid to be called a Bible in stone. This biblical correlation theory has been losing popularity, but is being replaced by the contemporary alignment speculation called the Orion correlation theory. This new alignment theory contends the Great Pyramid was built to create various so-called star alignments for some symbolic or esoteric purpose. Who knows what the next alignment theory will be to offer yet another reason for why the Great Pyramid was built. Some contend that the Great Pyramid was built as a weapon or alien beacon. Others hold the position that this massive structure was some sort of power plant. Egyptology is intractable in its position that the Great Pyramid was built using a big ramp and hand tools were used to create the precision stone cutting. Egyptologists tell us the huge benefit of building the Great Pyramid was to provide a tomb for a dead guy. These and other explanations provide no limit to the suggested answers to the question of why was the Great Pyramid built. There is another explanation of this wonder of the world, which provides an alternative answer to why the Great Pyramid was built. This explanation gives honor and glory to the original builders. It acknowledges the brilliance of the minds of those who conceived and built this huge structure. This additional explanation acknowledges the high technology associated with the Great Pyramid, but more importantly, this alternative explanation provides a real benefit which is so huge that it surpasses the cost of making the Great Pyramid and justifies its construction. This author contends the benefit received by building the Great Pyramid was not symbolic or religious. This building was not built to create symbolic star alignments or to be a tomb. The huge benefit this building provided was tangible and real. The Great Pyramid was infrastructure for the civilization which built it. It was a functioning machine which performed a vital task. It transformed poverty into prosperity. It transformed toil into leisure. It converted the desert into a garden. It improved the lives of the people who built it and enhanced the lives of their children. It was built to keep bellies full and a society thriving. This building, from the distant past, embodied ancient but very high technology. The Great Pyramid was a prosperity machine. The Great Pyramid did all of this and more because it was designed and built to be a functioning, powerful, and efficient water pump. And anyway, the article goes on to describe how the passages and chambers of the Great Pyramid operated or were designed to operate as a massive, industrially scaled, efficient water pumping system. And that water pumping system provided prosperity and a real benefit to the people who built the Great Pyramid.
Okay, that's your story. Now, any commentary on your story before we rebound on you and
Oh,
kick
yeah.
this ball around?
Yeah, that's that's the water pump for the Great Pyramid is probably the largest return on investment or reason that anyone has proposed for the Great Pyramid instead of pointing to something or being a tomb. So that's interesting to me. My first book describes how the Great Pyramid was built using water locks and barges, and we have a video series people can watch on our website at thepump.org. And the Great Pyramid was able to pump water, and that water was used for a host of purposes, including probably generating electricity, powering machinery, creating compressed air, and of course, irrigation. So that's kind of the focus of my research.
Stephen, this interpretation, analysis of what a function of great pyramids is new to me. Do you consider yourself to be the first or one of the first minds to explore this avenue of thought?
No, the first person on Earth to figure that out was a fellow named Edward Kunkel. He wrote this book, privately published, originally published in 1962, called Pharaoh's Pump by Edward Kunkel. It's out of print now, but you can still get it by interlibrary loan. I'm certainly your library won't have it. Let me put it that way. Small, not much bigger than a pamphlet, if you will.
Is there a publication date in there?
The original publication date is 1962. There was an updated edition in 1967, and I think the last one was 1980 or 82. The last edition. This particular one is 1962. This one, but he was the first guy to figure it out. He didn't. He wanted to know how it was built. How the Great Pyramid was built has nothing to do with language or the gods they worshipped. It was about how big stones were moved from one place to another. So you didn't have to worry about what the hat the pharaoh wore or anything like that. And it was fascinating. I read that book and changed my life, and ultimately started a nonprofit foundation with that title, the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation, in honor of Edward Kunkel. And my first book is dedicated to him. So he's the first guy that figured it out, but certainly he's passed away, I think, in 84, lived in Warren, Ohio. But research certainly has advanced, half a century since he's first started his research.
Well, it sounds like you've taken his foundation and built upon it.
I have taken his research and built upon it, added to it, kept his name alive, and published a couple of books, and carried on where I stand on his shoulders, if you will.
Well, I have a couple of contents before I pass the baton over to Mike over here. I thought it was really interesting that you talked about the structures of the Great Pyramids in terms of cost benefit analysis, because my dad, the wannabe chief scientist, was into that stuff, into that sort of thing, where the benefit needs to be greater than the expense, at which point the expense becomes an investment for future returns.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you that it seems, to me, it always seemed highly unlikely and completely unintuitive that the Great Pyramids were built merely to reflect a star alignment or something along that line. Certainly they were aligned with the stars, unquestionably. But when you talk about
every hydroelectric dam is aligned to the stars.
Lots of things are aligned to the stars.
Anything.
But let me carry on here. When you talk about the benefit is not symbolic as in star alignments or religious as in a tomb for a dead pharaoh. And the reason I think that Egyptologists have put that forward as a theory behind the Great Pyramids is that before the Great Pyramids were built, other pyramids had been built as tombs. But it appears to anyone with a brain that the Great Pyramids are not like these other burial tombs, royal burial tombs. Does that jive with what you know, expert Stephen?
You're funny. Well, the focus of my research is how and why the Great Pyramid was built. There's other pyramids.
No, but I'm saying, is it not true that before the Great Pyramids were built, there had been predecessor pyramids leading up to the Great Pyramids? They tried a lot of different things. The first pyramids were mounds, basically. It's kind of shaped.
Oh, that's
and then step pyramids, and then they finally got it together with, and then archaeologists began to find mummies inside and burials inside of pyramids. But the Great Pyramids, there were never any burials found. Am I right?
In all of Egypt, there has not been a single mummy found in any of the pyramids. Certainly, Egyptology has said a story about the sequence of construction of the pyramids. That's under scholarly debate. Many people think that the Great Pyramid was built before many of the other pyramids in Egypt, so that the other pyramids are like copies, like
poor imitations that came later, right?
They may have been
Chinese knockoffs.
Well, either Chinese knockoffs or more like a cargo cult, if you will, that they made. I don't know if you've ever heard of cargo cults.
I have. Yeah, I'm that old. I read about Foo Fighters and stuff.
Yes,
so I would,
but the cargo cults, they made primitive airplanes and primitive radios out of like crates and things like that to do the activities of the religion.
Well, during World War II, when planes would fly over and drop supplies to natives on remote islands, they began to associate planes flying over with food dropping from the sky and began to worship the airplanes and their pilots as gods. See the connection to UFOs?
But primitive airplanes made by the cargo cults came after the precise airplanes,
and were nothing like airplane. Well, they were airplane-like, but not made of metal. Typically,
they had palm branches for, But the point is, the sequence of construction of the pyramids in Egypt is under scholarly debate.
I'm glad you brought that up because I did not know that, and you're on top of it.
Yeah.
Okay, but two more things I want to run by you very quickly because then we got to hear from Mike. First of all, I can't wait. I'm about to explode. Wilhelm Reich wrote that he had every reason to believe that the Great Pyramid of Cheops, at least, was constructed as a huge orgonomic accumulator because it's constructed of layered granite and limestone, granite being inorganic and limestone being organic, and we have that layering of inorganic, organic to make an orgone field. And that the reason there are chambers inside the Great Pyramid and odd passages coming off and away at strange angles had to do with orgonomic treatments that had to do with perhaps eternal life, Ankh, symbol of eternal life, may also have to do with religion, that all of this may have been mixed up together. And we talk, and I'm going to rotate back round to benefit greater than expense as an investment. A ruler might find it a good investment to construct something that ensures obedience, awe, and control. So we got Reich, we got our pyramids purely symbolic. I tend to doubt it. I have a feeling they have function too. Water pump, I never considered. What do you think, Mike? Take your mute off.
Well, yeah, the pyramids. So how they were built. My theory about how they were built was sort of aligns with the fellow down in Homestead, Florida, who moved all the huge, massive pieces of coral around in 15 minutes after the guy showed up with the flatbed truck, and nobody ever figured out how you could get them off the truck. I think he had the secret of how to do it that the Egyptians used to move the boulders with. And as far as why they were built, yeah, that's people say that the shafts point to Orion and various different star places where other people believe that we came from. And it's possible that the Egyptians, this is just a theory, it's not a belief, but it's possible that the Egyptians believe that you need to return to where we came from. And since they believe that we came from those star systems, I guess what is possible is that they would go into these chambers and lay down and go through some ritual or whatever, and then go out that shaft at that, and return to the place where they believe we came from, because that's where we may have actually come from. So
like a rite of initiation or something along that line, perhaps.
Who knows? I mean, maybe they had some technology to actually move their consciousness to that part of the sky, or that to back in that, to those areas through, some ritual they did. They might actually be able to have done it. I don't know that it's that. Okay, let's give an example. Okay, so they're all buried with various different things that they believe they would need in the afterlife. Obviously, their burial rituals corresponded with their beliefs in the afterlife, which was and one of those beliefs was the Ba and the Ka have to reunite, the body and the spirit have to reunite in the afterlife for you to function. So obviously they had religious beliefs, and the pyramids may or may not have been corresponding to those beliefs. These are just theories, but that's my take on it. So I'll just leave it at that.
I wanted to toss in for listeners of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida here on May 31st, 2020, with the inestimable Mike Beaver and Stephen Myers, that what Mike was talking about in Florida, I did a little quick research here because I know about this place. It's fascinating. Coral Castle, they call it. It's technically oolite limestone. That's a cool word, oolite, O-O-L-I-T-E. It's a kind of limestone. And this guy, Latvian-American eccentric Edward, oh boy, he's got a foreign name, Leedskalnin. Okay, he lived from 1887 to 1951, and it's in an unincorporated part of Miami-Dade County, right at the south part of Florida. And there was a story about, this construction has huge coral limestone rocks built into walls and sculpted, and it's a garden. It's incredible. You can tour it. And this guy alleged, this guy, Edward Unpronounceable, said that he built it with some device that somebody saw holding it in his hand one day. It was all hush hush, right, Mike?
Well, what would happen is he would have the people who supplied the coral rock. The guy would arrive with a flatbed, and on the flatbed you'd have a 1 to 2 ton piece of square block of coral, and he would say, "Go take a break," and he would force the guy to go away where he couldn't see what he was doing. And while the guy was gone, within 15 minutes, that 1 to 2 ton piece of coral would be off of the truck, and nobody ever figured out how he got it off the truck with no help from anybody within 15 minutes. So, he had some kind of technology to get it off of that truck, and it wasn't pulleys and scaffolding.
What do you think about Great Pyramids as massive municipal waterworks?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know. There's evidence that desert was flooded at one time, so it's possible that the pyramids were underwater at some point. I've heard rumors there are pyramids on the bottom of the ocean, and crystals, huge crystals, and various different things that we're going to find out about. And I've heard rumors about them having the space underneath the palm or the paw of the Sphinx. And there's a picture, an aerial picture I saw recently of a hole in its head, which you never see because they never showed the top of it. There's all these different rumors floating around, and you never
I
know.
saw that picture from the top of the head of the Sphinx.
Yeah.
But Stephen, weigh in here. What about all this stuff? These other Sphinx and water. How's this jive with your theory, Stephen?
Well, certainly there's a lot of evidence for water on the Giza Plateau. I contend that water was delivered to the construction site and the Great Pyramid by the original builders. Other researchers have that same contention, including Christopher Dunn. He feels that they were able to deliver water to the Great Pyramid. And of course, there's water erosion on the Sphinx and the Sphinx enclosure that's Dr. Robert Schoch has written about extensively, and that's quite interesting. That erosion has put the date of the construction of the Sphinx much older than the idea that Egyptologists have. So there's a lot of water. Herodotus described, the ancient historian Herodotus described the Great Pyramid as being like a island surrounded by water. And the Great Pyramid originally had a wall around it that we think impounded water. And that water was used in the construction process. And Sir Flanders Petrie, the renowned early Egyptologist, said that he found Nile earth inside the Great Pyramid, which is sediment. So there's certainly a lot of evidence for water and that type of thing on the Giza Plateau.
That's fascinating stuff, actually, finding sedimentary Nile River water inside the Great Pyramid. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was one of his discoveries. He also felt that the Great Pyramid wasn't built with a big ramp or whatever, but that it was built
right. Yeah.
level by level of Sir Flanders Petrie. And so that's quite interesting. Herodotus was told that the Great Pyramid was built with machines on levels, and those machines had short wooden planks. So that's kind of hints towards a water lock, and that's a machine that has short wooden planks. So it's interesting. There's a lot to the research, a lot to understanding the Great Pyramid. It gives up its mysteries very slowly, if you will, and there's been a lot of interest in this direction of research.
Well, they're one of the 7 wonders of the world, for heaven's sakes. And we have the how were they built, and then the why, as we've talked about already. And both are, frankly, equally interesting topics.
To me, yes.
But I believe, my intuition tells me that the how and the why have to be integrated. And I believe that's what Mike had said earlier, too, is that, So, but Stephen, the way you present your thinking, your thesis, it's cogent, well put together, and you've done your research, you've done your homework, obviously. This is just awesome. I am humbled by your wisdom, knowledge, and I'm grateful that you shared part of what you've written with us all here on Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, broadcast every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern in the United States and Canada on my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Head over there, subscribe, click the little alarm bell, and you'll get alerts when we broadcast. And also available through my website, tabootopics.life/shows, and simulcast by Global Enlightenment Radio Network.com. Welcome. I'm Jean Broida. We have Stephen Myers and Mike Beaver with us. This whole matter of the Great Pyramids, in my opinion, Stephen and Mike, people are fascinated because it's not just the Great Pyramids, it's the Great Pyramids with the Sphinx, and the alignments with the stars and these mysterious chambers inside. And as Stephen had pointed out earlier, after 20 plus years of research on the matter, it's research into the Great Pyramids is as if an onion or a lotus was unfolding. You're taking the layers off an onion, and it's just one thing, one rabbit hole leads to another. Am I right there?
You are. There's a lot of ideas about the Great Pyramid that have been pretty rejected in terms of like Bible prophecy, and a lot of people reject the tomb idea like you do, mainly because it's such a small return on investment. So there's new understandings about the Great Pyramid that are emerging that people seem to embrace. I know that our civilization, we could spend $5 to $50 billion to build a structure that will symbolically tell people in the future that we knew pi. I mean, we could do that. But,
yeah, I get that. What you're talking about is the mathematical concept of pi 3.14.
Yeah, we could spend $50 billion to make a building that would tell people in the future that we knew pi. But the reason why we don't do it is because it's a really small return on investment. And I don't think the original builders built a building to spent all that effort to tell us that they knew pi. It's just one of those explanations for the Great Pyramid that's being rejected.
Well, there's another factor to consider, and I hate to bring it up because I want to move on to Mike's article here pretty quickly, but I have a comment and a question. First of all, my comment, we don't necessarily understand how the ancients valued things, used money, exchanged objects. We understand they did so. We know this happened because there's copious records. The first records in existence in Sumeria were counting heads of cattle and grains of corn, heads of corn and stuff like that for taxes. And this has been going back since forever. But my question, I have to ask this question. Have you run across, in your 20 plus years of research on the Great Pyramids, any depictions or accounts, really graphic accounts, descriptive accounts of how the Great Pyramids were built? Because if you think about it, the Egyptians documented a lot of things. They told a lot of stories, at least. They left a lot of religious texts behind on the walls and in carvings. But wouldn't you think that building something like the Great Pyramids would be something newsworthy that they would document? Where's all the documentation gone? Was it all destroyed when the library at Alexandria burned and I cried?
Well, no, there isn't any plans or architectural drawings about the Great Pyramid that have survived to today. And
doesn't that seem weird?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
They're just not there. If you burn down, are there any books from the Library of Alexandria left? No, they're all burned up. They're gone. A lot of information is lost in the sands of time, and it does seem odd. Maybe the people that wrote on the temples in the Valley of the Nile weren't the people that built the Great Pyramid. Maybe the Great Pyramid predated them. So I live in a town. It doesn't have any depictions of teepees being made because we didn't make teepees. That was from a previous culture. You know what I'm saying? So, but you said the motivations of people may have been different earlier than us.
Well, not motivations, but also how things that we think we understand, the value of things, and how what's the word I want? How commerce, in other words, commerce as we understand it, may not have existed when the Great Pyramids were built. And so when we think of a cost-benefit analysis, this may not really be germane in terms of the Great Pyramids, that we have pharaohs who controlled everything, basically. And they had, in other words, they controlled all the resources, human and otherwise. So
they controlled commerce, that's for sure. They traded with other nations. And they were smart leaders, just like leaders of today. But the wants, needs, and desires of the people back then are very similar to now.
But wouldn't they be pretty much the same?
Yeah, people
haven't changed much.
I want my kids to eat every day. So do you. I'll bet the people that built the Great Pyramid wanted their kids to eat every day.
Well, you know, archaeologists found one of the first things they found at the base of the pyramids were when they started excavating out in the desert sands away from the pyramids, looking for human habitation around the pyramids to suggest who built these and how. They found evidence of some of the earliest mass bread making and beer brewing operations. They were feeding these laborers beer and bread. Yum, yum.
Certainly, yeah.
Which will keep you alive, actually.
Yeah,
It's not a bad diet, frankly.
Ate food, that's for sure. So, you know, and we have on our battleships, you know, my dad was on a battleship in World War II. He ate very well. You know, they fed their workers. So it's the same kind of thing. And if a pharaoh or the leader could have unlimited water supply, he has unlimited power in a lot of ways. His civilization can prosper. You know, people can eat and that type of thing. So
well, it harkens me to the hanging gardens of Babylon. But I'm stopping right there because we'll do another show and we'll just bookmark it right there. Mike Beaver, what have you got for us? A Taboo Topics article here on Taboo Topics with Gene Broida. It is the last Sunday in May 31st, 2020. Mike Beaver, take it away.
All right, so instead of having an article, the first thing I wanted to show you was a scientific paper. And if I tried to read it, people would fall asleep really quick. But it was about the 4% universe. And I was
okay, we'll be sure to describe it verbally for people who are listening in on globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com and don't have a screen.
I understand. But what I've chosen to do is, instead of even talking about that, I decided to switch to one of my other ones. I had 6 of them, right?
Oh, snap. You did. You came so well prepared.
Okay, so
I was amazed.
You talked about earlier about the Tic Tac videos that people have seen.
That's right. The Pentagon declassified and released as authentic.
Right. Well, the Pentagon didn't release them. They were released by individuals that were outside the chain of command.
That happened 2-3 years ago, but the Pentagon declassified them and formally released them. This happened like a week ago.
Right. But
Go ahead.
I'm going to dash your enthusiasm here really quick here. Okay, so
go ahead, I can take it.
The best evidence that's been shown so far, one of those Tic Tac videos is like 3 or 4 minutes long. Well, one of the links that I posted to you, the YouTube link. Okay, if you click on that, you'll notice that there is an actual place where there was a video there, but it says video unavailable. So I've seen the video, and I've never to this day heard anybody talk about it other than myself publicly. This video was a 2-hour long video. Now, I will describe everything about this video. So there was a guy I believe it was at a MUFON meeting. He was standing up on a stage, and he was a former government employee. And he's got a computer with a big flat screen TV, and or record video like a VHS tape, whatever. He's fast forwarding, stopping, rewinding, and showing frame by frame a much longer, an hour-long version of what you've seen on the TV. That 3 minutes, this is an hour version of that. Okay, so here's how it starts. First of all, this is an official government video. It's not videotaped by Joe Blow off the street. This was the Customs and Border Patrol filming this. It's their official video. It's an internal video that was leaked accidentally.
So if we were to title this, what would we call it?
Well, it's actually on my site. You can go to my website.
But just tell us. Please,
I'm about to
don't leave us
do.
guessing.
Hold on. Let me
Have
go to
mercy.
my UFOs page.
Have mercy and mercy.
then I'm
And
gonna
while
go
you're doing
to-
that, I'll welcome everyone
right,
who's
here it
just tuned in to Taboo Topics with Gene Broida. It's great to be here on the last day of May 31st, 2020, with Stephen Myers, veteran researcher into what's up with the Great Pyramids, y'all. And it's looking like maybe it was a huge municipal water pump, which would be a good thing for a big city, and a construction works project, which harkens back, in my mind, to the wasn't it 19, it was before World War II, between the World Wars, 1930s was the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC. We don't hear much about that anymore, but the CCC was part of the New Deal, Roosevelt's New Deal, to get America back to work after the 10-year Great Depression. And that was to rebuild America's infrastructure, bridges, roads, and et cetera. So it looks like Mike might be ready. Back to Mike.
All right, it's called Incredible Leaked Video, UFO Video Captured by Homeland Security. The event occurred at about 9:20 p.m. on April 25th, 2013 at the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico on the island, and was monitored by the crew of a DHC-8 turboprop aircraft from U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. Okay, so I used to ride next to one of these guys every day going in DC. Anyway, so they're in, and he used to manage these planes that I'm about to talk about, this guy that I rode with. Anyway, so in the video, it starts out, they're filming from this DHC-8 turboprop, looking down at the tarmac. And on the tarmac, there's a Learjet. The Learjet is a Customs and Border Patrol Learjet. It's trying to take off, but the Aguadilla Airport tower will not. They held the Customs and Border Patrol Learjet on the tarmac for an entire hour while the UFO flew around above the airport. Now, the next thing you see, the image pans up from the Learjet to the UFO in the sky, and then it tracks perfectly this UFO around, flying above the airport for what's remaining of an entire hour. Now, the video that was on YouTube was a 2-hour video of a former government official fast forwarding, stopping, and rewinding a 1-hour video of the Customs and Border Patrol video that was shot above that airport for 1 hour of this alien craft that you cannot see any longer. I watched it myself, so I'm absolutely positive it existed and was out in public for a short period before they took it off of YouTube. So that's my document. And if you want, we can go on to others, or we can talk about this one more, whatever you want.
Oh, we definitely want to beat this one up a little bit.
Okay.
What do you think, Stephen? Any
Yeah, I've
thoughts?
seen the videos myself. So about what's on these screens, and it's fascinating information. I don't know completely what to think of it, but it's very telling in terms of it's physical evidence, I would call it, and it's certainly a crack in their armor, if you will, and ultimately more information will will come to light, and that would be a good thing to corroborate or find out more about all of this very recent goings on in terms of these videos.
Yeah, having access to longer videos is always a plus.
Yes.
We get these little sound bites. We tend to get these sound bites of information on anything anymore. And I've had listeners of the show say, couldn't you reduce to like 15 minutes? That's as long as I ever have to listen to something. And it's an interesting notion, but other people want more. A 3-hour show, a 3-hour show, 3-hour show. The point being that these Well, there's several points here. One is why the federal government believes that the average person's knowing that UFOs are real and exist is so terribly, why it's so important, why it's so terribly important for people not to know that, why it's so important for national security. My theory is that what they're hoping, the US military is hoping, and the military industrial complex that's making all the money off military contracts, what they're hoping is that people won't connect the dots and realize that in as much as UFOs represent a superior force, and that it's probable, a lot of ufologists believe, based on research, that certain aliens at least will not allow humans to destroy the earth through nuclear detonation. Okay, that knowing that there is a force superior to humans frequenting earth, perhaps they biologically engineered us, and knowing that we don't, maybe the government knows why they're here.
So
Go ahead, Mike. Help me here. I'm foundering.
Do you understand why Kennedy was assassinated and who did it?
You tell us.
Well, 10 days before he died, he wrote, he had a command typed out. He signed it and he gave it over to the CIA and the Department of Defense. He told them to share all of their alien knowledge with the Russians 10 days before he died. That's why he was killed. Okay, so the guy, the lawyer who represented the Richard Nixon's burglars who burglarized the Democratic National Committee.
The Watergate.
Right. The lawyer that defended those criminals, you can go and listen to this on YouTube. He gave a public interview and stated that he was out on his front lawn smoking a cigarette with the counterintelligence officer running counterintelligence for the entire CIA. And he asked him, why did you kill Kennedy? And the guy said, because he wanted to share our alien knowledge with the Russians. That's what the guy said. That James Jesus Angleton was the guy's name that he was smoking a cigarette with. And they changed Kennedy's route that he was going to go within 2 weeks, just before he went to Dallas.
Yeah, there was a last minute change to the parade routes. I've studied the JFK assassination quite a bit. Continue. Yeah.
You do understand that the guy, what's the guy's name that they call him in the movie JFK? He's the guy that meets with in the park and gives out all the information. That's really a conglomeration of two different people, but one of the two people that character represents from that movie was a fellow, a very anti-CIA fellow who was the first liaison between the Air Force and the CIA, and he stated his team, the purpose of his team at that time was to guard the president outside the perimeter that the Secret Service could handle. So anything beyond the perimeter the Secret Service could handle, his team handled everything beyond that perimeter, right? That's the purpose of his team, right? So 2 weeks or a week before Kennedy was assassinated, he got a call from his commanding officer sending him overseas on a wild goose chase for no reason. Okay, and he states, and you can still listen to this on YouTube, is that the way you can tell his team was not in Dallas that day before Kennedy went through there is because of all the open windows in those buildings. If his team had been in Dallas before Kennedy got there, he said they would have nailed shut every single window in every single building and the whole route.
Over the parade route.
Right. There would be not a single window open that you could even open. They would nail them all down.
Okay, well, let's get back to more like paranormal, because you got some great topics. You got some great topics. What else you got?
So anyway, the other one I was going to bring up was I sent you a link to an article. It's a nap.edu. It's a book, actually. And in that image, if you go to that link that I sent you, it'll start to come up with a pyramid, and then it'll come up with a book on top of that. And then there's a big X on the top right, and you got to click on that X to close the advertisement for the book. Once that closes, you'll see a pyramid of all things. Oddly
And
enough.
I'm going to read out the website address, nap.edu. So it's an educational website, nap.edu/read, as in read a book, /839//4#92. Back to you.
And don't forget the www dot at the beginning.
On my web browser, there's no www dot, but if you need it, you know where it lives.
There is.
And so we're looking at, I clicked the big X, I'm at the page, I got rid of the whatever it was, and I'm looking at a picture of a cosmic pyramid. That's where I'm at, and that's where you will be if you go to that website address.
Okay, so this pyramid is based on an understanding of cosmology. It's not based on theory like string theory. This is based on actual observation. Okay, so I don't know the full story because I haven't read the book, but there were a couple of teams or more of cosmologists that were looking at the stars. They were examining the movement of galaxies, stars, black holes, everything that's out there. They were examining the movement of all these objects. And then they were mathematically trying to determine the weight of all these objects. And what they figured out is that the weight of all the objects that we know about is not anywhere near enough in volume of weight to explain the way these objects were moving in the heavens. And so they came up with this understanding that all of the stars and all of the ordinary matter, all of that combined, everything we think is all the heavens, is really only 4% to 5% of the actual things that exist on this level. Okay, so we're living in a 4% universe. Okay, so the bulk of what exists on this level is dark energy. That's 60 to 70%. Nobody has a clue what it is.
And so what we're talking about is stars and planets, what we think of as matter. Is that right?
The matter is only that's the 4%. The stars is actually 0.5%. All the stars in existence is 1/2 of 1%. But if you take all the ordinary matter, electrons, neutrons, the stars, and all the matter that they exist within, and put all that together, it's no more than 4 to 5%. So that's everything. The stars is only 0.5%. And then if you add the ordinary matter, it comes to 4%. Okay, so the next construct up is cold dark matter, which you start to see on the newer Star Trek versions and other science fiction that's coming out new. That's the dark matter. That's 25 to 35%. And then, but the big one is dark energy, 60 to 70%. Now, the reason why I brought this up is not just to show you guys a pyramid on a page of paper. Okay, I want you to understand that I have this theory. Okay, that first of all, you were talking about subtle energy a while ago. Well, that's an area that I have some expertise in. We're not going to get into it today, but I used to do laying on of hands, and I'm quite familiar with subtle energy. I was taught by a guy who hung himself to death from a tree how to manifest subtle energy in your body. Okay, and I'm not going to get into that because we really don't have time for it. But here's the thing: my theory is that dark energy and subtle energy are one and the same. And as incarnates, if you include, let's say, all the alien races out there, let's say there's a Google number of alien races. You put them all together, it's still only 4% of the universe. Now, of this level, the dark energy, that's where the subtle energy exists. If dark energy, it really is subtle energy. then that's the bulk of this existence. And scientists don't even believe that solar energy is real.
And so I have to interrupt, for people not looking at the picture of the pyramid, cold, dark matter is thought to represent or make up 25% to 35% of everything in existence. Excuse me. Whereas dark energy comprises the majority, 60 to 70% of everything.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So for people who can't see the pyramid, that's what we're talking about, that almost everything in the universe is not matter as we think of it. It is either cold, dark matter, 25 to 35%, or dark energy, which I've never even heard of, 60 to 70%. Wow.
Right. So anyway, you'll hear people like Michio Kaku saying, if you think the universe is made of electrons, neutrons, and protons, you're totally wrong. That's not right. And the reason why he's saying that is because only 4% is composed of that. The rest is something else. Nobody has a clue about dark matter or dark energy. Now, my theory, as I was stating, was that dark energy and subtle energy are one and the same. And also, my next theory that goes with that is that disincarnates, ghosts, demons, angels, earth spirits, anything that's outside the normal realm is part of that dark energy. Okay, so if you take all the Google number of alien races out there and put them in that 4%.
And for again, I have to interrupt because I'm such a geek. I know what you're talking about, but I know there's viewers out there going, "What's he talking about? Google?" Explain what a Google is, please.
So a Google,
it's a number. Okay. It's a big number, right?
Not just a search engine. It's a number that is
That's right. Before the search engine, carry on.
It warps the mind to think of how many zeros there are on there. But if there were that many,
would it be fair to say it's a very, 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 very large number?
Right. And so if there were that, let's say there's that many alien races, just for the sake of argument, that's still only 4%. Regardless of how many there are, an infinite number, it's still 4%. The bulk of the universe is still dark energy. And subtle energy, dark energy, if my theory about those being one and the same is correct, and if my theory that disincarnates are part of that dark energy, that means that as far as incarnates compared to disincarnates, you have 4% compared to 70%. It's like for every alien, you have 17, you divide those two, you have 17 disincarnates for every alien, for every incarnate.
That's mind-boggling, actually. That's astonishing. So and maybe not just aliens, but ghosts and stuff. Go ahead.
Right. So if you think of ghosts as being rare, think of them being 17 times as many as you. Okay. And so I was outside of a MUFON meeting after it was over in Austin, Texas one day. And I was talking to an abductee. I'm a contactee, right? So we had this argument, contactee versus abductee. Tassel, you were talking about, he's a contactee, not an abductee. So anyway, this girl said, aliens control the planet. I said, no, disincarnates control the planet. She goes, no, aliens control the planet. I said, no, disincarnates control. And we went back and forth for like 2 or 3 minutes or more, like little children. Nobody said anything other than our side, right? At some point I said, stop, stop, stop. Okay, you win. Aliens control the planet. And guess who controls the aliens? Disincarnates. So I win. Okay, so it's disincarnates all the way down. You know, like there's turtles all the way down below the universe. There's disincarnates all the way down. We start out as a disincarnate. We end as a disincarnate. Before you're born, you're disincarnate. After you're dead, you're a disincarnate. You're here for how long? 70, 80, 100 years? But you're on the other side for an eternity, before and after. So your existence is mostly as a disincarnate, not as an incarnate. Even you, even us incarnates, we only spend a certain amount of time as incarnates. We spend the bulk of our time as disincarnates.
Well, I read an interesting book called The Alien Interview, which purported to be transcriptions of multiple interviews with an alien captured after a Roswell period event, and possibly Roswell or the Corona crash in New Mexico. We're talking late 1940s, around 1947. And this book is published as nonfiction. It may be fiction, but the storyline is that this captured alien is dishing the dirt on the history of the world and everything that has come along afterwards. And it ties in with this notion that, help me out here, Mike. This was a telepathic communication with a nurse, a female, who was thought to be receptive to these notions and ideas. And this being would not talk to any of the male military men at all. And refresh my memory. Just tell me your last sentence. I have to say it's late in the day and I'm tired and I just need, when I get off on these tangents to explain my source, I sometimes forget the leading train of thought. So we were talking about, why did I bring up alien interview?
I'm not sure. I was talking about the number of disincarnates versus the number of incarnates.
Right. Okay. So here we go. So this alien told this woman, a nurse, that all of us, everywhere on Earth and anywhere else, anywhere there are material beings, incarnated beings, we elected, more or less, to incarnate because as disincarnated without a body, as eternal beings without a body, we are all eternal beings. And eternity is long and boring. And so as eternal beings, we have the power to create universes, planets, solar systems, universes. We get bored and we eventually break down and agree to incarnate with all of these little rules and the soul contract, some people call it the soul contract. And I found it very interesting that this would be part and parcel of human origin, which is one of my specialties. So I'm glad you brought that up there.
Well, before I got into hypnotherapy, I met a guy and I was part of a religion called Eckankar.
I've heard of that.
Okay, so I was going to bring up one of their documents, but I don't know if we have time. But anyway,
we'll save it for the next show. Have you back. How about that?
Mentioned that he regressed himself. He's one of the spiritual techniques to regress himself to back to when he chose his incarnation. And I've taken quite a few clients to points in their timeline where they chose their incarnation. So I understand from my clients and from this fellow and from everything that I've come across so far is that we each choose our incarnation before we take it. And after you're gone on the other side, a number of my clients would meet a being of light that was also a portal, and they would get shown points in their timeline of their life. And before they would move on, they would make a decision. Do I want another life or do I move on and do other things? And, that's one way people chose. This fellow, his story of how he chose his life, he was in a place where there were these beings of light, and there was these Rolodexes, and the Rolodexes were, the image on the Rolodex was a living image. He said you couldn't look at the image on the Rolodexes because if you look too closely at any one of them, you would just go sucked into that reality and go into that life. So you had to not look at any of the images on the Rolodexes, and they were spread out in this room, in this place, as far as I could see. So he was choosing that's the start of the choosing. And then at some point later on, they would show images up like on a wall, but there were no walls, but bigger images of his future life. And then beyond that, he actually lived partially his future life to choose whether that was the life he wanted. So you had all these different stages of choice. And
apparently all of us have gone through stages of choice.
Is
that your experience?
We all choose our incarnation. Yes, that's what I've my understanding.
Well, let's get back to this fascinating topic that of everything in the universe, everything in existence, 1/3 is matter and 2/3 is dark energy. Stephen, What's your take on that?
Well,
Any thoughts
all
that there's more unseen existence than seen or tangible existence?
certainly,
Isn't that
yeah.
what we're talking about here?
There's more space between the electrons than there
Between
are.
my ears?
No, I mean, a lot of that's certainly beyond the scope of my research. I wish I was smart enough to understand what I don't understand about that. But we do have a choice, that's for darn sure. And that is a choice that we don't have to believe the things we were told as kids. And we can transcend our own programming and
Amen to that.
and embrace new ideas and that type of thing. And that's what's going to make the world a better place. All these people we mentioned, that's what they did. They didn't accept the reality they were told and dedicated their lives to understanding things, even though they were suppressed in a lot of ways. So that's what I hope people do is exercise their free will to choose between the falsehoods of the past or the new ideas emerging in the revolution of ideas we're having right now.
Hear, hear. Well said, sir. I agree entirely.
Well, thank you.
Listen, it just seems to me and listeners of Taboo Topics with Gene Broida every Sunday at 7 to 9 p.m. This is the first time I've had a conversation with I've had a conversation with Mike Beaver, but the first time I've had a real conversation with Stephen Myers. Stephen, in your 20 plus years of research on the Great Pyramids, how much UFO theory interface have you run into? Because UFOs and the Great Pyramids have a lot of connection for ufologists, but you seem to be coming from an engineering perspective and a socioeconomic perspective. Do you interface with paranormalists much?
Well, there is a lot of overlap between the Great Pyramid and UFOs or ancient aliens, obviously. One reason is because the Great Pyramid seems to be an out-of-place artifact, if you will. It's ultra modern in appearance without any ornamentation, no formal writing like on all the temples and that type of thing. And it's so unusual in its construction. Sir Flanders Petrie said it was like a machine. And with all of the precision associated with the Great Pyramid.
And when was he saying that? Wasn't it the 1800s?
Yes, it was like the 1890s to the 1930s. That's a famous quote, but I don't know offhand the book it was from. So, but yes, the UFO people see the Great Pyramid must have been built by aliens because of its super high technology. But again, who built the Great Pyramid is beyond the focus of my research. So
right, you're into the how.
I'm into the how.
Yeah.
How and why.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Well, hey.
A lot of people don't think it's fair enough, but I appreciate your open-mindedness.
What do the other people say?
Well, you got to know who built it. Not really. I've had people that say, I reject your research because you're not trying to figure out who built it or when it was built. So, there's some closed-minded people out there. But it's like, let's say you get in a car wreck and an ambulance comes up. You're not interested in who built it or if, or even when it was built.
You might be, but it's not germane to the people in the crash.
Right. But the people in the crash don't worry about who built it or when, because it's not germane or instrumental. But let's say we found out the Great Pyramid was built 30,000 years ago. They started building it 30,000 years ago from today's date. Let's say we found that out as a fact. Okay. Let's just say we did. How would that help anything? No. Because our very next question is, well, how did they do it? And why would they do such a thing? And let's say we found out the guy that financed it, the leader was named, let's say, Bob, okay? Bob built the Great Pyramid, okay? Well, the very next question is, well, why would he do such a thing? And how is it done? So I don't concentrate on the who or the when, but the how and the why.
Well, I am, again, so very grateful to have two great minds thinking great thoughts in rather different channels that really are part of the same stream of searching for a congruency and an integration and a blending of the seen and the unseen, the physics and the metaphysics. This is what I've spent my life dedicated to doing as a mystic and a scientist, bring these two together. And I'm so grateful to have had Mike Beaver and Stephen Myers on the show. This is the part of the show, we're running a little late, but that's great. I love it. This is the part of the show where I thank both of my guest panelists for coming aboard here on Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, because quite honestly, I couldn't do a show like this without you, the guest panelists. We wouldn't have a round table without other people other than me. And I'm just grateful that you carved out some of your precious time to share your news and views with viewers around the world on my YouTube channel, Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, at tabootopics.life/shows, and on globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. Mike Beaver, it is the time of our show where we reluctantly begin to say goodbye by telling everybody great things about ourselves and shouting and giving our shout outs. So how can viewers find your work? What are you getting up to these days? And release any contact information to viewers that you feel comfortable doing.
My website is profoundstates.com. That's just remember the country you're in, unitedstates.com. Throw away the word united, put in the word profound, profoundstates.com. And if you get to profoundstates.com, the very top right-hand corner, the very first link you'll see there is a link to my book, which has not been published. I'm looking for an agent. It's an excerpt and an index from my upcoming book, which is titled Instruments of Control: How Attaching Spirits Cause War, Terrorism, Crime, Racism, Murder, Insanity, Mental Illness, Molestation, Marital Discord, Suicide, and many other illnesses, and are leading humanity to its fourth impending fall. Now,
I wonder if that could take Guinness Book of World Records for longest title.
it might, but I doubt it. But if you go and look at that index and you scroll all the way through it, you'll find a lot of very interesting topics, especially at the very bottom. And we'll get into those one day.
Do you have personal contact information or some kind of like email or a form on the website that people can use to send you hush-hush information?
My email address is my first name, Charles, dot my last name, Beaver, at comcast.net.
And Michael or Mike is your middle name, as I understand things, and you like to go by Mike.
Yes.
But your email is Charles.
Correct.
Very good. What else? What you're getting a book published? That's great. So
I have a book that I would like to find an agent for, but what I'm doing at this time is I only started a few days ago, is researching self-publishing. Now, Stephen may or may not know anything about self-publishing. I don't know if he had a publisher publish his books or not, but I'm, may or may not go down the road of self-publishing. I'm doing some serious research on it, and I'm probably going to do that because the agents out there, most of them won't even read my book. They'll read the title and go, "Oh, this isn't something we can promote because it's not aliens and it's not focused in one topic." But it is. But you just have to, if you got me started on a conversation and you said, "Mike, talk about anything you want to talk about," anything, I would start talking about attaching spirits, because they are what controls this world, and they are what creates war, terrorism, and crime, and all the things listed in the title of my book.
Wow. And I happen to know a little about this as a metaphysicist, and I'm right with you there. This is going to be a great read. This is a great read So thank you for contributing that to the world, the universe. That's awesome.
Well, I hope it gets published soon, whether it's self-published or through an agent, through a publisher, standard publisher. However it happens, if it happens, I have dreams of the future about what I'd like to do. I don't know that we have time to get into them, but basically I want to get in front of a crowd and demonstrate that I personally have attaching spirits, because I've had my wife touch mine and she could feel the energy of them on me. And if other people can do that while they're being recorded on video, one day, hopefully the world will recognize as a society that attaching spirits are real and begin to make the change from the timeline that we're on now, which is not a good one.
Definitely. We'll have you back on Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. Stephen Myers, thank you so much for sharing your in-depth research on the Great Pyramids as possibly a municipal water supply. How can people contact you, and what other projects, if any, are you up to? I know one project you're up to, and I hope you mention it. And if you don't, I'll prompt you.
Well, thank you, Jean, for having me on the show. You can contact me through my website at thepump.org. And the best way to contact me is through email. My email address is info@thepump.org. You'll see the link from the website. But the most exciting thing that we're doing right now is our trip to Egypt, which is just in a few months. In February of next year, February the 2nd through the 15th, we're doing about a 13-day tour of Egypt and cruising down the Nile and having all those meals and all kinds of fun, and going to a whole host of sites, including the new museum in Cairo, the Great Pyramid, Luxor, and just too many to mention. And you can find out more about that on our website. And there's an informational video that you can look at that's on my YouTube channel, and a link to my YouTube channel.
And what's it called?
Just, what's it called? My YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Stephen Myers Videos, I think is what it's called.
Fair enough. And that's STEVENMYERS if you're listening on Global Enlightenment Radio Network or have your video turned off.
But just just go through my website to get there. And there's other videos, our video series about the assembly process of the Great Pyramid. So we're doing, I've got the books that I'll do a gratuitous plug again. First book, How. Second book, Why the Great Pyramid was built. And visit our website to see what we're all about, our upcoming activities, mission statement, and answer your questions, frequently asked questions page, and who knows what else is on there. So, but I just ask people, they've heard a little bit here. It's new to you, this information, but just find out what it's about. Don't just come up with something in your mind that actually has nothing to do with what I'm doing and then debunking the research. Do the due diligence of being a researcher, pick up a book and read it, or find out instead of being Facebook educated, if you will. So that's all I ask people to do. That's the most revolutionary thing you can ask a person to do, is read a book. I seen
and form an opinion. I agree entirely.
Yeah, instead of form an opinion and don't read a book.
So read our books, and you can read my book.
Oh, wonderful.
Time for my shout out. Unknown
Very
Objects,
good.
the top 10 U.S. UFO cases. I want to point out that the cover art, the splendid cover art, here's the crash, and on the back cover, the retrieval. I'm trying to get the glare away, but we got the Army truck.
Nice.
Retrieving. Now, all of this illustration was done in a virtual reality game, not virtual reality, in a computer game called Second Life.
Oh, fun.
Where architects can build. And the architect in question here, software architect, is Daryl Watson. His website is www.bydaryl.com. Darryl, D-A-R-R-Y-L. He's technical producer of this show. Thank you so much.
Oh, Daryl, I may have to get a hold of you.
I couldn't do this without him. He is splendid. Look what he did. It made me look so good. And this is a top 10. It really is a top 10. And I want talkback. What do you mean the top 10? What about this case that happened? For example, I skipped right over Cape Girardeau in Missouri. And partly it's because we don't know that much about it. We frankly didn't know much about Foo Fighters, the first chapter in my book. It's a slim chapter, which makes it a good first chapter, because that's where I get you and I pull you in. And every chapter talks about not only the story, but evaluates a bit, at least, how credible were the observer or observers? How did the media treat this story? And why did I include that story, that case, in this book? What about this story warrants its inclusion in the top 10, the exclusive top 10? What about it? There's always something about a case, which is why I bring it in. And then finally, concluding remarks that neatly segue to the next chapter. And it's got an index in the back with citations. It's a proper book, but it's a slim book. It's not intimidating. And it's on Amazon, should you care to check that out and patronize our art and our craft. I love to hang with authors, and I love to say authors rule, because we do. We do. I can't tell you how quickly this 2 hours and 11 minutes has gone. One's being a number series that I see quite a bit on digital displays, whether it's 3 ones or 4 ones. So I want to thank everybody for listening in to the May 31st, 2020 episode of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida. It's available on my Taboo Topics YouTube channel of the same name, at tabootopics.life/shows, and at globalenlightenmentradionetwork.com. Big announcement time. We, by which I mean I'm taking the month of June off to go fishing, and suggest you go too. That was a sign I saw at a very remote grocery gas station in rural Alaska while I was up there. Gone fishing, you go too. So with that said, again, many, many profound and sincere thanks to my guest panelists on the May 31st, 2020 episode of Taboo Topics with Jean Broida, that being Mike Beaver and Stephen Myers. See you later, alligators. Over and out.
That one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.